Next up to the stage, a topic on we need to talk about masculinity, social connectedness, and mental health. A warm welcome to Dr. Zac Seidler, Director of Mental Health Training at Movember. Zac, an absolute pleasure to have you at the festival this year with us. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from you on this topic.
Thank you, Tanya. And lovely to see no one's faces, as is typically the case in these instances. It's going to be increasingly worrying when I have to do these face-to-face and having to deal with that anxiety again. But for now, I'll just speak into the ether, which is always a fun thing to do. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Zac Seidler, and I'm a researcher and academic who works across the University of Melbourne and Movember. I know I have a beard at the moment, but come November, this is all gone. My CEO ensures that we get shavers dropped on our desks. I'm also a clinical psychologist, and I really specialize in working with men. And masculinity has been an interest of mine for a number of years. And thankfully, I guess I wasn't really planning for this, but is now, somewhat of we're in a cultural moment of sorts. We're in an inflection point, I think, when it comes to talking about gender. And I often talk about the fact that there is a bit of a gender reckoning when it comes to masculinity at the moment, in that femininity has been on the radar of many, specifically women. From the 60s, 70s, the feminist movement really took off, and there was a lot of introspection and reflection about what it meant to be a woman. This came as a result of feelings of disempowerment and disenfranchisement and a lack of equality. And so what that meant is that women have had this constant dialogue between one another, and a lot of academic, literature has come out as a result, trying to understand what it means to be a woman and how to grow and develop and interact as a woman day to day. What that means is that masculinity and being a man has, because we've been in such a powerful and privileged position as men, not gained that same amount of attention. And while that may have been beneficial to men of previous generations, my father and grandfather's generations, where the belief that not paying attention to these things and just staying strong and carrying on in a way was believed to be the best mode of practice, we're coming to terms with the fact that that's not the case. And so what's happening right now is that we are in a moment where, whether you look at Parliament, whether you look at Hollywood, whether you look at your everyday workplace, where masculinity is really coming to the fore. And it's really coming to the fore when we talk about bad behavior, I think, in many instances, whether that's, consent, sexual assault, all of this stuff. But it's not being spoken about enough when it comes to masculinity and mental health and mental well-being. And that's really my specialty. And the reason for that, I think, is because we've all been complicit in perpetuating this stereotype that, men need to be a certain way. And so what's happening right now is we're cracking that open and we're going, all right, what are the different contradictions that go on here? And so I wrote this piece in 2019 entitled, We're telling men to open up, but are we ready to listen? And I think that's really the moment that we're in at the moment, where lots of people are driving more men to talk, to discuss what's going on for them in their lives, to express their emotions in an open and honest and vulnerable way. But what is happening, as an undercurrent, is still those traditional masculine ideals of stoicism, strength, control, independence and self-reliance run deep. And they run deep in workplaces, they run deep at home. And you can do as many well-being initiatives as you want. And I've been privy to many of them. I've been, both the person conducting them and the person receiving them. And there's a lot of lip service, I believe, when it comes to, we'd love you to open up. We'd love you to share what's going on for you, but in a time and place that makes sense for us as your employer. And I think that that's a real problem. We also need people from the top. I did a talk for a huge legal practice, one of the biggest in Australia, the other day, and I get on and there's 300 people on the call, And I said, where are the partners? You know, they invited me to come and speak. And someone said to me, oh, they don't come to this. They don't come to these well-being things. And that really says a lot. So we've got this idea that men should talk more, should open up. But then there's this dual dialogue, which is really that you need to get on with things, that you need to maintain productivity. And we can have a 5-minute chat, but then you need to get back and get over this stuff. What we're realizing is the toll and the tax that this takes on people in the long term when, spending an hour or cutting off your day a bit early or taking a day off for this type of thing is going to be in everyone's best interests. Nonetheless, many men continue to push on. So we need to find male-sensitive modes of communication. And something that I really stress is the idea to many men, because, terms like toxic masculinity can be very isolating and shame-inducing for many men, and they're not very useful, I don't think. Instead, I like to refer to the idea of flexible masculinity. And that is that we don't need to do away with many of these masculine norms. We don't need to do away with the idea that you should be, stoic and strong and powerful in a certain setting. What has been very detrimental to men's mental health in the recent, history of men has been the fact that this stuff has been rigidly applied. It's been a conformity that pervades contexts, if you will. It is something that isn't flexible to time and place. And what we need, if I always think about a fireman. If a fireman is going in and fighting a fire, we need him to be stoic. We need him to have his shit together, to be honest. When he gets in there, he needs to be ready to rumble. But I want to make sure that when he comes out, he is able to debrief. He is able to express the vulnerability about what he's just saw and what he's been through. Because we know whether it's PTSD, depression, or otherwise, that repression and suppression of emotionality is very dangerous in the long term. And so having that flexibility of, I can be stoic in this meeting, but after I can find the people in my workplace to connect with and to debrief with and to be open and honest with. And so there's nothing wrong with holding on to some of those, masculine traits. Many women have them. They're very useful and very advantageous in the right setting. But in others, they can be really harmful. And so we need to be able to flick the switch on and off. And many men don't necessarily have that insight at the moment to go, when is this useful and when is this not? That's something that we really need to work towards. Something that I also want to stress is around, the modes of communication. When men are coming and being that vulnerable self, it may not look like you expect. It may look very different to the stereotype of, if it's depression, of someone lying on the couch eating ice cream, crying to rom-coms. That's what you see in the movies, or someone not being able to get out of bed. We know, and plenty of my research has shown, that depression and anxiety in men actually looks like, it manifests really differently. Rather than being internalizing with those feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness, it in fact comes out as an externalizing manifestation. That is anger, irritability, frustration, violence, aggression, drug taking, drinking, all of these things that are actually sadly condoned in many men as male specific behavior, and it leads to this understanding that these behaviors are men behaving badly rather than as cries for help. Because we know that when men get really distressed, when you push that down and you don't allow it out, it will naturally bubble up to become those externalizing symptoms in many ways. And we need to find ways to connect with those guys, even when they're frustrated and angry. And I'm sure that plenty of people on this call have either felt it themselves or have been, the person at the other end where that anger has come out from an employee or a boss, and it's happening repeatedly. And rather than seeing this as a personality trait, for instance, or something that is beyond, intervention, I often see that as a suggestion that something is going on for them and something needs to be dealt with. But we're not very good at dealing with anger. We're not very good at intervening and allowing that, to be discussed and expressed. Rather, it gets shut down and the person gets angry and distanced, and then we end up in a problematic place. we're currently living through what is seriously a male suicide epidemic in this country. And, you know, I don't use that word lightly, given we're going through a pandemic. We're losing 7 men a day to suicide in Australia. And the notion that there is, you know, this is all just happening out of the blue is not necessarily the case. Many of these men have been in touch with you know, EAPs, with psychologists, with GPs, and you know, that they go unnoticed and undiagnosed, and lots of things slip through the cracks. And that's really what we're aiming to shift by having you know, upskilled people in the workplace who are willing to have those tough conversations and then direct people accordingly and check in repeatedly after the fact with these guys. Something that we know that's really important, and is the final caveat, I guess, of this little session that I'm having, is around social connection. We know that men will prioritize you know, their work over their social lives, and what that means is that compared to women, men lose friends as they age, and that's really problematic. It gets deprioritized when they become fathers. It just drops off, and they say they can't find time, and it becomes you know, something that they don't actually strive towards. That becomes really problematic in the long term when we look at the fact that, you know, Movember ran a survey a couple of years ago and asked, you know, how many close contacts have you got? How many close friends have you got in your life? And over 40% of guys said that they only have 1 or 2 close mates that they can rely on and call on. That means that when they are suffering with something, they don't have that huge group of people to rely on. You then add the fact that their ability to emote and communicate in ways that make sense to the world, in ways that are comfortable for them. You know, it's much easier when you've got a lot of different friends. You can pick and choose who you want to describe certain things to and who you want to open up to depending on your mood. When you've only got 1 or 2 people, it's really hard to do that. Social connection saves lives. And whether that's in the workplace or otherwise, we need to find ways to get men feeling comfortable and connecting with one another. You know, you look at the longest running longitudinal study out of Harvard looking at life expectancy and well-being. And the men who are still alive, this started in the 30s or so, the men who are still alive are the ones who had the best social connections, are the ones who had the greatest friendships. It doesn't matter about your genes. It doesn't matter necessarily even about obesity or exercise. The one fundamental, you know, life-saving thing that we've got is social connection. Loneliness is so deeply harmful, and we've you know, been hearing a lot about that as a result of COVID, and you're watching lots of older people passing away prematurely, not because of COVID, but because of loneliness, and dementia symptoms becoming worse and worse, you know, quicker than usual because of this situation. We need to find ways for men to connect with one another, and not in just stereotypical ways at the pub and at the footy. We need to find ways where they can emote and communicate with one another at a time and a place that makes sense for them. So that's something really that we're striving towards. We can't just tell men to open up more. You can't just tell your partner, you can't just tell your colleague to just talk, just tell us what's going on, because they don't often have the language, they don't often have the comfort, they don't often know where to begin. And instead, it's a matter of making sure that we can provide the scaffolding for them. And often the best way to do that is to be the role model. We need more positive role models in the workplace. I see too often that the you know, managers who come forward and discuss their previous mental health difficulties, for instance, are always females. We need to find a way for these men to come forward and share their stories in an open and honest and authentic way, and then hopefully that line of communication will grow stronger over time, and men will get normalized to the fact that real masculinity is striving for self-betterment, is looking after oneself and those around them, rather than denying, you know, the issues that exist in their life. That's what we're striving for at Movember. That's what, you know, I do each and every day in my work with men. And I think that it's really important that we take that away when talking to the guys in our life, that flexibility is key, and that hopefully we can get to a point where we can save men, you know, before they get to the point of serious self-harm. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Zac. And I wasn't going to tell you at the beginning, but you presented to a room of close to 300 people just then.
Wow. Who needs to know?
Exactly. Anyway, there's some people in the audience who would like to continue following your work. Where would be the best place that they could do that?
For sure. Twitter or LinkedIn. Hit me up.
Okay.
I've also got a
Fantastic.
website, zacseidler.com, so check it out.
Beautiful. Now, I'm going to keep you right here. You're on the panel discussion that's coming up next on the topic of grief in the workplace, how to handle death, loss, and trauma